Hello and welcome to GreenFleet Talks. My name's Kate Armitage and I'm your host for our discussion today. I'm joined by Kevin Ledger, who is EV sales specialist at Drax Energy Solutions. Good afternoon, Kevin.
Hi there, Kate. Thanks very much for having me today.
It's a pleasure and it's very nice to speak to you again so soon after our recent webinar.
Very much so.
Yeah. So today, Kevin, we're focusing very much on SMEs, and I appreciate that's a very broad category. But what are some of the common barriers that an SME might face when switching to electric vehicles to meet their sustainability targets?
Yeah, good question. Thanks, Kate. I think one of the key factors that comes up time and time again is cost. Essentially, the rollout of EV infrastructure can be expensive, and it's certainly a real key element when energy managers or transport managers are starting to look at that kind of deployment. And of course, that is a key piece of the puzzle. Equally, the understanding and knowledge around EV as well can be a problem. Some people, especially in SMEs where you might be wearing multiple hats, maybe you don't feel that you're the expert in actually the rollout of EV and what that infrastructure needs to look like. And that also actually probably does lead into another important key factor, is that when you start to enroll in a project such as EV and the infrastructure, is actually disruption to your business and what that might mean. So I think, wearing lots of different hats in an SME can cause some problems, but equally it also can be an opportunity. You can start to develop relationships with infrastructure partners that have that experience, have that ability to be able to provide you with cost down opportunity, and also provide that expertise, which means that your actual downtime is minimized. And ultimately, you also get the infrastructure that you need for your business in the shortest timeframes possible.
Yeah, really great advice, Kevin. Kevin, you've got stacks of experience of dealing with fleets who are on this electrification journey. So what advice would you give to SMEs in terms of assessing whether electric vehicles would be suitable for their business? And on the flip side, whether or not they need to install workplace charging infrastructure?
Yeah, of course. That's another great question, Kate. The best way to answer that is for those guys to start to look at their data, understand where their vehicles are going to be, both during the active part of the day and during dwell times when the vehicles are not in use is really key. Understanding routes, understanding where your drivers are going to be during your working day, and that can really benefit. Or allows a transport manager to make informed choices about where they need to be putting their EV infrastructure. If you understand that your vehicles are going to have dwell times of between 5-6 hours at a depot, then of course charging infrastructure at your depot is a really important factor of your EV deployment. It allows access to the cheapest possible energy rates for your business. It allows you to make the choice of your energy provider, so you can make choices around sustainability. For example, by only signing up to a green energy provider. But also, you could start to look at the potential for bringing in solar PV, for example, if you've got that opportunity, and you can take full advantage of producing your own energy to put that into your fleet to cost down the cost of driving miles. It's an incredible opportunity if you've got the right amount of data.
Yeah, and Kevin, and we can't kind of overemphasize, whilst it may appear very complicated, with the workplace, with a charge point in your own depot, you've got full control, you've got the autonomy, you've got the reassurance of knowing that it's not going to be blocked by another vehicle, and you're not paying the same amount per kilowatt hour as you would be on the public charging network, which can make quite a big difference to that business case.
Yeah, absolutely. That ability to have control over your own infrastructure really is important. And as well, Kate, the other thing that you can do is you can actually start to design the charging to suit the needs of the vehicles that you've purchased.
Yeah.
If you've got strict health and safety policies that say that you need to reverse in, you need to be making sure that your charging infrastructure suits that health and safety policy, for example. So it gives you that opportunity to take control of your charging environment. And that's a real key benefit for anybody looking to roll out EV charging.
Yeah. And with the management software that comes with that as well, you've got the peace of mind of knowing that those vehicles are plugged in, that they are scheduled to charge. If there's a problem with that charging, you'll get an alert. So it just gives back the control to these smaller and medium-sized businesses who potentially don't feel that it's within their control.
Absolutely, yeah. And data is power, right? The second that you've got that data and you've got it coming in thick and fast and it's at your fingertips, you can then start to make informed choices about where your vehicles need to be and when. You can pick the right driver for the right vehicle to provide to go on the right route. And that you've got that data to be able to bring that vehicle back in good time at a good state of charge to be able to get that full charge to be ready for the next day.
Yeah. That should be the Drax slogan, by the way. The right vehicle, the right charger, right route. Let's flip. So we've kind of highlighted the cost, but can we flip that conversation and turn it into an opportunity? What about using that infrastructure to unlock additional revenue?
Yeah, it's another great question, Kate, because I think sometimes that can be overlooked by businesses. I think, as EV charging infrastructure, starts to be deployed into businesses up and down the UK, it's really starting to open up opportunity for those businesses that have got ahead. Quite possibly, you're putting in EV infrastructure into locations where maybe there isn't any. Maybe you're in a rural location, for example, or you're in a part of town which just doesn't see a lot of footfall. So the big CPOs out there maybe aren't interested in that particular location for members of the public. But, during the working day between 9 and 5, the place is rammed. We've all seen those business parks. Let's say your vehicles are all out during that particular day. You've got all of that EV infrastructure sat there ready and waiting. This is where return on investment comes in. The addition of app-based payments or contactless payment system means that people can just potentially, if it's right for you, come onto your site, utilize those charges, and you can really start to make a return on investment. But also, that's a massive plus point for your business. People see your business associated with EV, associated with the green agenda. You're actually doing something positive. Plus providing that infrastructure to where people need it, people are going to know that, they're going to recognize it, and they're going to keep coming back.
Yeah.
If you're a business, I guess, with people that potentially where you want to attract customers, you're also looking at things like increased dwell time, which is key. And then we can start to have sort of, information and support around things like incidental spend. I think there was a piece of knowledge out there at some point that suggests that every person that stops for a charge typically buys a drink, a snack, a few pounds worth. I certainly do. You only have to look at the size of me to know how much I go around charging. Kit Kat and a cup of coffee is what it's all about for me.
Yeah, well, you are not alone. I did smile, and I have frequently stopped at farm shops and spent more on free range eggs and goodness knows homemade cakes than I have on the actual charge itself. So you are right. And of course, there's the utilizing that infrastructure for employees who pay to use it, but if they haven't got a home charge point, then workplace is the second most convenient location for them.
Absolutely. I think getting charging infrastructure into the places where people are already at is what's key, not trying to second guess where they're going to be, and that also brings value add, right? If you've got charging at work, that's a value add. You get a better you get a better work experience if
Yeah.
you've got somewhere where you can charge. And I think that, that aids in things like staff retention. But equally as well, I think importantly, when we talk about that kind of road to electrification, it starts to normalize it for people, and that's great, because there's still a huge piece of work ongoing at the moment with the general public about education around EV.
Yep.
And, SMEs do tend to be the cornerstones of their communities in a lot of ways. And it's just another way that they can support that rollout of electrification, normalizing it for the general public. You see it in your day-to-day, and it doesn't become this scary piece of infrastructure in the corner of a car park that people are a little bit worried about.
Yeah, I completely agree, Kevin. It's a great point. And I've got to ask this, not least of which because it's been number one GreenFleet Talks discussion topic for at least 18 months now. But the ongoing changes to the ZEV mandate, is this another challenge for SMEs in their electrification plans? How do you see it?
I think the relaxation of the mandate could give SMEs additional time. So let's look at the positive. It potentially gives SMEs the additional time to try and potentially plan that fleet electrification. To be able to give them that little bit more time to put charging infrastructure in. But I do think that there is also a risk, that there is the associated risk. We were grateful to see that government grants were extended out to March 26.
Yeah. On the vans.
Sorry?
On the vans or on the workplace?
The workplace charging scheme,
yeah.
I think that was granted out for 12 months.
Yes.
But unfortunately, there's no guarantee that that's going to go beyond March 26. So, businesses probably need to, think about that, whether or not that is going to be an important part of their infrastructure rollout, those particular types of grants. So, you do want to think about that. I think as well, the one thing to think about as well is as we start to move closer towards this date that unfortunately is kind of being pushed out a little bit, is the potential bottleneck in the availability of services. As businesses like Drax, for example, get busier and busier, we need to make sure that companies that do want to make that switch actually have access to these services. And there is a danger as we start to sort of push out towards the 2030, 2035 sort of period, that more and more companies push out, that potentially there is a bottleneck in service. So we need to make sure that that's not a major consideration for businesses. And that's not necessarily just for infrastructure. Potentially it's for power. We look at the struggle that sometimes we have with DNOs and accessing additional power.
Yeah.
There may be a case for saying, you want to get that ring fence now so that you're ready for 2035, not trying to start in 2035, when other people have already got in there first.
And the connection times can be very challenging, can't they? So again, at least understand what your requirements are. At least know, get yourself in that pipeline now. Don't, like you say, don't wait until 2035. And I guess that constraint could even apply, probably not to the provision of electric vehicles, but actually could affect your ability to buy ICE vehicles as you get closer to 2035. And the cost of running an ICE is almost definitely going to go up as
absolutely.
as demand goes up.
Yeah, again, you're absolutely correct. You run an ICE vehicle for all the way out to 2035. Those costs are going to go up and up and up, and you're missing out on the potential golfing saving on the potential EV vehicle. So there is that factor to take into consideration as well. I think the other one as well, really, to sort of have a think about is kind of reputational benefits. Do you want to be seen as the business that potentially held out, or do you want to get there first and have that little bit of value add now? as the business that started the process and as the business that actually made the leap into green technology.
Yeah.
And was at
as
the
as an innovator, as a like you say, at the forefront, as transformative. I mean, I'm not sure we could say that they'll be first, because many fleets have already electrified, but
yeah, I mean, I think we're still early enough where you can take advantage though, right? I mean, I think that there's a lot of scenarios, especially in that kind of like last mile delivery where green services are still very much valued at this stage, and it's certainly a benefit and certainly worth taking into consideration.
Great. Well, Kevin, thank you very much. You've highlighted a lot of opportunities and given me plenty of food for thought. So thank you very much for your insights.
Yeah, thank you, Kate. I really appreciate your time, and giving us the opportunity to have a chat today. But yeah, absolutely, it's been great fun.
Great. Well, I hope to speak with you again soon. Of course, I would like to say thank you to Drax Energy Solutions for joining GreenFleet Talks. And finally, thank you for watching, and please tune in to GF Television again soon.